Well, welcome everyone. We have a session this afternoon that is called Setting Your Priorities as a Nonprofit. And our organization has asked Catna 1A Foundation to come in and present just to kind of give you a little personal plug. And I'll read the bios for Lisa and Sanatha here in just a moment. But Catna 1A has accomplished a lot of their goals in a very short period of time. And I wanted to give this opportunity to them, and Eden wanted to give this opportunity to them to kind of talk about what they did along the way and how they accomplished those goals in such a short period of time. So I want to introduce our two speakers today. The first one I want to introduce is Lisa Manister. Sorry, Lisa, for that. Lisa co-founded the Catna 1A Foundation in March of 2020 and currently serves as president. In 2018, after years of genetic testing, her youngest daughter, Emily, finally received a diagnosis of Catna 1A at the age of 20. While Lisa does not believe earlier identification would have changed their path, supporting research for a cure has become her passion. Lisa has worked as both an advocate and a special educator. She received her interdisciplinary leadership training in the field of development disabilities as a fellow in the Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities, LIND, program at Westchester Institute for Human Development. Lisa has a Bachelor's of Arts in History from Cornell University and an MA from Teachers College and Columbia University. So Lisa, I wanted to welcome you here today. And Sanatha is Vice President of the Catna 1A Foundation. After nearly 2 years of consulting with various specialists and countless tests in 2020, she learned that her daughter has a Catna 1A gene variant. She deeply believes in the promise of the foundation's mission to accelerate the development of treatment options for Catna 1A children and shares a sense of urgency that drives the foundation's work. The Catna 1A Foundation has been a tremendous source of hope and support for her family as they navigate their rare disease journey. Sanatha is also a practicing attorney. She represents small businesses and nonprofits in the DC metro area and teaches at Georgetown Law. Wanted to welcome you both. And Lisa, I'm going to turn the floor over to you and let you get your presentation started.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here today. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm Lisa Manister, and Sunitha and I were asked to speak about how, as leaders of a nonprofit, we have set our priorities. Change the slide, please. Thank you. So I'd like to tell you that from the get-go, it was a deliberate and well-planned execution, but that's not really true. The organization initially came about somewhat organically as a response to the lack of resources and information available after my daughter Emily finally received a genetic diagnosis of a Catna 1A genetic mutation when she was 20 years old. Next slide. Catna 1A is a gene that very simply affects the opening and closing of the calcium channel in the brain and thus the firing of neurons. It is a very large gene with many different genetic variants, but our patients present with global developmental delays, intellectual disability, autism, ataxia, which is a balance and coordination disorder, epilepsy, hemiplegic migraines, which are stroke-like episodes accompanied by loss of skills, eye movement disorders, and many other neurological disorders, including speech and language issues and cerebellar atrophy. Change slide, please. On our website, we have a section about our Catna 1A champions. In Emily's story, I talk about our family's diagnostic journey. As I mentioned, it took 20 years, but not for lack of trying, to get a diagnosis. Her genetic testing always came back normal. It wasn't until we finally did whole exome sequencing that we received a diagnosis. Growing up without a diagnosis, however, no one could tell me that Emily wasn't capable of achieving a certain skill: reading, writing, speaking more clearly, riding a bike. So we tried it all. It was very hard work, but she's a fighter and accomplished a great deal. When we finally received the diagnosis and I realized that there is a neurodegenerative component to this disease, well, that's what lit a fire under me. because the thought of watching my daughter lose skills that she had worked so hard for is devastating. Once we received the diagnosis, I started researching the disease. I quickly realized that there was a lot of basic science on the calcium channel and how it works, but no one seemed to be looking for a cure. In other words, there was a lack of translational science, and thus the CACNA1A Foundation came to be. Next slide. The CACNA1A Foundation was founded in March of 2020, and our mission is to find specific treatment options and a cure for CACNA1A patients by building a collaborative network of patients, families, clinicians, and scientists that will work together to raise awareness and accelerate the understanding, diagnosis, and treatment of CACNA1A linked diseases. I know that's a mouthful, but in simple terms, we are funding translational research, trying to break down the research silos and get scientists from around the world to collaborate while raising awareness and working to educate our community. The patients, parents, and caregivers, and the physicians who see our patients, because telling a patient or a parent, I guess, I'm not really sure what this diagnosis means for you, is not acceptable. In starting the organization, the first thing change slide. Sorry. In starting the organization, the first thing I did was incorporate and set up our 501c3. There are a lot of books and resources on how to do that, so I won't go over it. In addition, NORD has a toolkit that has quite a lot of valuable information. I looked at the organization as a business, and I came up with a very basic business plan, our organizational roadmap, developed our mission, vision, and value statements, and basic infrastructure. I have to give a shout out to the rare disease community and other PAG leaders who took my calls, answered my questions, and held my hand as I went through the process. I couldn't have done it without their support. We are lucky because the rare disease world is extremely supportive and feels that no one should go through the process alone. Next slide. So what is priority setting? It's making critical decisions about how to allocate your resources. When one thinks of resources, it is often from a financial perspective. When we began the organization, we had no financial resources. So we had to reach out to the community and do fundraising. We started with the board's connections. As we gained traction, our patient community began to support us. We knew, however, we knew, however, that we had to engage all our stakeholders and bring them together. And we did this by putting out a monthly newsletter, sponsoring a family and scientific conference, a 5K run, walk, roll, and attending professional conferences, and also reaching out to authors of published papers. We forged partnerships with other rare disease organizations. Next slide. These are some of the affiliations and the partnerships that we made in the very beginning. There's so many more today, but we're really, really grateful for all of these organizations that have supported us and partnered with us. Next slide. We realized to bring everyone together, you need a call to action, and that is your story. We all have them. I started this talk out by telling a small part of mine. Your story is a powerful tool that helps forge an emotional connection to your stakeholders. Most rare disease families have traveled a similar path. There have been so many obstacles on our diagnostic journeys. And then once you receive a diagnosis, there are so many emotions that you deal with. Sharing your story communicates your why. It motivates others and gives you credibility. The bottom line is it provides hope. So we recently put together a short video about our organization's story, and I'd like to show you the 4-minute version. If you love it, we have a longer one that you can access on our website. I believe it outlines our organization's priorities and why we are doing what we are. And then when it's over, Sunitha will take over for part 2. Thank you. We saw so many doctors.
across the country, geneticists, neurologists, but it wasn't until 2017 when we actually got a diagnosis. Emily was 20 years old. It was about a year ago we found out that her genetic testing revealed a mutation on her CAC-NA1A gene, or CACNA1A. And it was a relief to find an answer to explain what we were seeing in our daughter. But at the same time, it was really, we were shocked and in disbelief because our doctor gave us this news, but really had no resources to explain what this meant for her life. When she was 10, she had a medical crisis and was in the hospital. We now know it was a hemiplegic migraine, which is a stroke-like episode. And so we had to start testing anew just to rule things out. We found her diagnosis.
Individuals with CACNA1A mutations experience a wide range of symptoms, including often uncontrolled epilepsy, a balance and coordination disorder called ataxia, eye movement disorders, and hemiplegic migraines, which are stroke-like events that result in paralysis on one side of the body, loss of skills, and potentially fatal cerebral edema. There are no specific treatment options for this disease, and our kids are often in and out of the hospital to manage medical crises. What is even scarier for us as parents is that CACNA1A can also be neurodegenerative, which is why we need to accelerate research towards a cure.
So we ended up on a private Facebook forum with a lot of other families, looking for information, looking for connections, looking for somebody with our child's exact variant, which we didn't find, but we found commonality with other families, particularly mothers, who were doing the same thing that we were. We were reaching out for connections, we were reaching out for information, and looking to find out what is the best way forward for our child so that she can thrive and have the best quality of life possible.
We set up the foundation in the spring of 2020, right before the COVID-19 pandemic.
So we've met on Zoom, we've met on FaceTime, but we've really never met before. So walking into a room, it was just so different.
I've got to see their faces in little boxes, but I've never had a chance to meet them or their daughters. And so it was really special to be able to see the daughters that are the driving force behind all of our work.
It was shared experience, right? I mean, that's what we're all looking for in life, is to find someone who's like shared, I think oftentimes some of our hardest experiences. And there's something really refreshing about being in a room of people who you don't have to explain, and there aren't questions, and you don't ever feel like they're sitting there wondering but not asking their questions. Like, we all just get it.
How can people help the foundation? The bottom line is that we need funding. There is a lot of basic research on the CAC-NA1A gene, but we are looking to fund translational research, which means research focused on a cure.
The foundation has given us a great sense of hope and purpose, and we know that together we can push science forward because the science is there. We just really need to organize our community, we need to organize our researchers, and we need to show them that these kids deserve a cure.
She lights up the room everywhere we go. And it's one of the reasons we wanted to start this foundation, because there's so many kids out there like her. All the other kids with CACNA1A, they have families right behind them, just like we are from Marin, that want them to thrive, want them to succeed, and want them to have the best quality of life. And foundation is going to be the way that we can give it to them.
Thanks to our researchers, we are learning more about CACNA1A related diseases. But anyone who has been touched by it knows there is still a lot of work to be done. At 24, my daughter's cerebellum has begun to atrophy. The clock is ticking. Our goal as a family-led foundation is to push science forward to discover life-changing treatments for everyone living with this rare disease. Our kids are depending on us.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to start talking now about our organizational priorities when we were starting out, what we think are the major challenges in executing those priorities, and what we've been able to achieve. Finally, I will talk about what we hope to achieve in the years ahead. There are a critical set of points we knew we had to get our heads around in order to ultimately determine our path towards a cure or therapeutic for the CACNA1A community. The answers to these points would really help us set our priorities and develop our roadmap to a cure. The first is that we had to understand the disease. We were the first and are the only patient advocacy group focused on CACNA1A. Before the foundation was formed, there had been no effort to understand the progression or natural history of the disease. One of the first major initiatives we launched is the natural history study for CACNA1A. Second, you need to know your community. We had to start very simply we started very simply with a contact registry so that we could start to understand who our patients are and start to make connections with them. We had to figure out who was studying CACNA1A. So we combed through the literature and internet to find researchers, clinicians, and companies who are working in this area. Finally, we had to understand where there were gaps in understanding the basis of the disease, and we had to try to fuel research by supporting it directly. These were our priorities for the first 2 years of operations. We took these overarching priorities and developed an initial roadmap to a cure to operationalize these priorities and implement programs. Our first step was to find patients in our community so we could better understand the disease and enroll them in our natural history study. We reached out to genetic testing labs and asked them to include information about the foundation on any genetic test reports that were positive for CACNA1A variants. We also found patients on existing CACNA1A Facebook groups and started to set up our own social media outreach through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn so that we could put information out to our community and start raising awareness. We also reached out to pediatric neurology departments at major academic medical centers and CACNA1A researchers to tell them about the foundation and our initiatives. This was all in preparation to get our patients involved in our research. We ultimately wanted patients to enroll in our natural history study, which we launched at Columbia University in our first year. It was the best way for us to understand the hallmarks and patterns of disease that have been overlooked to date. And it was going to help us further understand how the disease progresses so that we could develop therapeutics. In order to start filling in the gaps in our understanding, we also developed a request for proposals and ultimately decided to fund three translational research projects. And we continue to accept grants on a rolling basis. Our focus this year is to build a biobank of patient-derived cells and animal models so that we can become clinical trial ready. Finally, we've also started to bring all the stakeholders in our community together. We held our first family and scientific conference last summer. We had over 200 participants register and 70 researchers and healthcare professionals join us, so it was a huge success. We're hoping to build on this success by hosting a hybrid event this summer. There are a lot of challenges in starting a new organization, but there have been some unique challenges because of the pandemic. Fundraising is one of them. We had to primarily do fundraising virtually, and we relied heavily on board members to raise funds through their friends and family. It's also been difficult to cultivate major donors during the pandemic, just given the uncertainty of our times. Another challenge is really growing and diversifying our board, both our scientific advisory board and board of directors. It's difficult to find members who can commit as much time as needed for a small organization that is completely volunteer-based. Next, finding and engaging the patient and parent community has been difficult, and especially improving the breadth and reach of our efforts. Patients and parents who are in the rare disease community know that there's unpredictable health challenges and other priorities that take precedent over sometimes getting involved in organizations like ours. We know that we have to develop a relationship with a biopharma partner, and that's been difficult just given our virtual nature. We're hoping to attend more conferences to focus on reaching out to these industry partners. Despite the challenges, we've been able to achieve a lot in less than 2 years. Going from incorporation in March 2020 to launching our website in July 2020, we were able to raise $200,000 by the end of December of 2020 so that we could fund our initial set of research grants. We also started the natural history study before the end of our first year and have been able to successfully gather our community in other initiatives such as the RareX data collection program, which we launched in August of 2021. The big news this past year for us was that we were the recipient of a Chan Zuckerberg Initiative Rare as One grant, which is going to help grow the organization and our capacity to pursue our roadmap to a cure. Finally, our vision for the next 2 to 5 years is grand and bold, and we're hoping that we'll be able to grow on the success of our first 2 years. We're going to build a collaborative research network that really focuses on the gaps and filling in the gaps of our knowledge on CACNA1A diseases. We will also be focusing our efforts in the next 2 to 5 years to develop our understanding of the relationship between genotype variants and the phenotypes that we're seeing clinically in our patients. We also plan to pursue a drug repurposing program so that we can try to find if there are any therapeutics that our community can take advantage of that already exist in the marketplace. We will continue to develop a transformational drug development partnership with industry, and hopefully will lay the framework for genetic therapy approaches that will provide novel or precision medicine therapeutics for all individuals with CACNA1A related disorders within the decade. Our vision is bold, but we know that we can get there step by step. Thank you, Jeff and the DASH Alliance, for the opportunity to share our journey with the rare community.
So thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Sunita, for sharing what CACNA1A has been doing, has been working on. Again, our organization really admires you for that, your drive, your tenacity to go with it. And, you know, and Lisa, I'll say this, that you haven't stopped just because your daughter is a grown adult. You continue to strive to find something for her to help her with her quality of life. You know, before this session, we had shared a little bit, and we were kind of talking, and when we were looking at your presentation and stuff, and one of the things that you had mentioned is that, you know, we're all tired. You're tired, the pace you run, that you're tired, and you can feel like sometimes you get discouraged. But I wanted to give you and Sunita a chance to say something about, you know, how do you keep going? What's that inspiring thing? Because there are organizations out there today. I had a friend, he lives in California, he's actually speaking on one of our panels, that he talked about. He said, you know how many nonprofits that start up and they get started, but they're just tired and they just have to quit. But how do you keep going, and what does that? So I'll turn that over, and Lisa, or so I don't care which one, comments, or both even, you know, if you want to.
Well, I guess I can start. I guess I would say what inspires me is my daughter every single day. I actually have a really interesting story, which is that my Emily is my youngest child, and my middle daughter was a hockey player, a girls hockey player. And when she was 12 years old, she was trying out for a premier ice hockey team. And she went to the very first tryout, and she came home and she said, I'm not going back. The girls are so big, they're all really tall, they're really strong. It was so scary. They're much better than me. And she didn't want to go back the next day. And I said to her, look at your sister. Every single day she wakes up, she gets dressed, and she does something that's really difficult for her, which is go to school, which is something that all children do. But for her, you know, it was really, really hard to go to school. And she had a lot of learning issues and speech and language issues. She didn't have a lot of friends in school. It was just, every day was a struggle. And I said, but Emily gets up, she puts a smile on her face, and off she goes. And you need to do the exact same thing. And so Rachel went to the second tryout, and, you know, needless to say, she made the team, but it was a real lesson, you know, I think, for my other children. But so, yeah, I guess I would say that that's what inspires me. And I feel that because she is 24 and I didn't have the this diagnosis until she was already an adult, I have there's this sense of urgency that's driving me, that I need to try to, I hate to say fix her, because she's fabulous the way she is, but there's still this sense of, you want your child to have a better quality, or you want them to always have a great quality of life. And when I read about the potential of this disease, it's scary, and you don't necessarily want that for anybody that you love. So so that would be, so I guess, that's my inspiration, and my words of advice are just, be opportunistic. You can't do it all, but do, but do what you can, because you don't want to burn out, as you just said.
Yeah, Lisa, it's hard to top that. I think that it's, you're exactly right. And I would echo what you said. I think obviously our children are so core to what we're doing here. It's why we're here. They've given us this great sense of purpose and mission. And it's really hard to slow down when you look at your kid every day. And as a parent, you'd want them to have the best possible life. That's, any parent would want that, rare disease parent or not. And so we will do everything that we can to get our kids the best quality of life that they can achieve. And part of that is what I'm doing, with the CACNA1A Foundation, in addition to, everything that we do for her outside of the foundation's work. But I think that the foundation really provides such an amazing opportunity to help our kids in their lifetimes. And I've seen that in just less than 2 years of the organization existing, how much progress is possible in a short amount of time if we can organize our community and organize our researchers and clinicians to better understand what is at stake here. And so we have been fueled, I think, by the success of other patient advocacy organizations and the amount of success they've had at bringing therapeutics to their community. And we hope to do the same exact thing. And I think we've really been just so blessed to have a set of rare disease leaders who have been so collaborative and willing to share their lessons learned with us. And we have just really taken their advice and operationalized it. And that's how we've been able to do as much as we have been able to do in the first 2 years. And we hope to continue to build on that in the years to come.
Well, fantastic. And, again, I just want to thank you both for taking the time, and thank you for sharing about it. I think this is great. I think it will help inspire organizations that are out there, and help with, sometimes we can get in the midst of it all, and when you're going through it, you get caught up in the day-to-day thing. And I really liked your slide that you have a 2 to 5 year plan. And you have those goals laid out that are more than just, next month a type of a thing. So of what you would like to achieve. And those are hard. I mean, those are hard to plan. Those are hard to input. They take time, they take energy. And both of you know that rare disease is not a static thing. It's a very dynamic thing that happens, is that today we're fine, tomorrow we're in the ER. So, as an organization, I really admire what you've done. I want to just thank you personally. Eden wants to thank you personally for taking this time to come and be a part of the Rare Fair this year, and being a part of what Dash Alliance is doing. So thank you both.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it. Have a great conference.
Thank you both.